We've got a lot of people that are signing up for GPT accounts and different things and AI accounts that are using their personal because they don't necessarily want the boss to be, knowing that they're running to AI to learn this thing or, using AI to help write emails, whatever that looks like. So they're setting it up on their own, using it privately and quietly, but they're also training it, right? So it does have tons of company information. What's the protocol for what can and can't go in there of the companies? What's the stuff as far as security and privacy still that's being entered into these places? But two, if you're training it to do all of this. And so I think, again, back to what are the standards of practice? How do we say, hey, we're going to provide the account and this is the account that you need to use. And if you leave, that's coming with us.
You're listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business, hosted by Jared Johnson, the top SBA lender in the country. On this show, we break down business acquisitions, talk to industry pros, and provide real-world advice for buyers and sellers.
Welcome back to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. Today I have Paige Wiese. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's been a little while. We've been kind of going back and forth. I was excited to do this in person with you. Thanks for being patient. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna have a lot more fun doing it in person.
Definitely. Yeah, it's always a little easier to talk face to face. So, okay, give us your background and then what all you do.
Absolutely. So I own Cheering Digital. We're a full service digital marketing agency. Been in business for 16 years. So we've seen all sorts of clients, industries, business sizes, ways that they work, helping all the way through from website design and development into digital marketing. So very much a full service digital partner for our clients, and started off just doing freelance work, teaching myself. I had no idea, no background in this whatsoever. And then decided, I was just listening to clients and hearing like the pain points and what was going on. I was like, all right, let's start bringing content writing into websites. Let's start bringing more marketing into these things and really starting to nurture the client through the entire process of how do we get this full digital presence going instead of how do we just build a pretty site.
Cool. And then the main thing that kind of caught my attention when I first had the ability to talk to you was helping people transfer sort of the digital assets. And I don't feel like people talk about that enough when it comes to ETA or, when someone's acquiring a business. So maybe talk a little bit about what you do there and then how you got into that.
Yeah. So what we do on the digital asset side is, we've seen so many clients, or we've set up accounts over the years and had clients come to us. We ask them like, we're happy to edit your website. Do you have the login details? And almost always it's somewhere, let me go find that. And we maybe never hear from them again because they knew they didn't have them. Sometimes no, they'll have them within a day or two, but very rarely does the client have them right then or even easily accessible. And so that's something that we started noticing is who's paying attention to these pieces, because they really are critical when it comes to not just having a business, but then to your point, as we get deeper and deeper into a deal. So whether that's prepping for exit, whether it's ETA, whether it's acquiring or merging, who's handling these assets to get them transferred successfully? And so we started seeing, like IT companies will handle maybe the domain name, maybe the email address. They don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of the social side of it all. It might be that a web developer is handling the hosting and the website. They don't really want to handle analytics or the social profiles. And then same thing, you've got your marketing vendors that start looking at the marketing side, but are terrified to touch a website. They don't want to break it. So there really wasn't, anyone really focusing on how do we transfer all of these assets over to the new business that's acquiring it, and that type of deal process and deal flow. And it's outlined by the lawyers and all of the paperwork. They're also not trying to hunt this stuff down. And so we're really trying to help make that a much smoother process and go a lot faster for businesses and organizations during that process.
Yeah, I don't think people really understand how vital it is to the business. And they're sitting there saying, oh yeah, we got to transfer a lease agreement, employees, payroll, the vendors, equipment. There's so many things that have to transfer. And then they kind of get so ingrained in the transfer of the business that then oh yeah, how do I, transfer it? Or, maybe with the website, it might not be for months, years later that they go, oh yeah, I wanted to update something, or, there's something I want to transfer there. And then, hey, do you have that? No, do you have that? So how do you figure it out? So if someone came to you as a seller and they said, I'm planning to sell my business in, 6 to 12 months. What would be the process there that you would work with them to prepare them on kind of that side of the transaction to be ready for it?
Yeah, on the seller side, what we tend to do is start with our digital asset assessment, where we just start to identify the gaps. What does that look like? Do you know where these logins are? Are we compliant? Do you know where your brand files are? Do you have your third-party tools all aligned? And we start to work through what are your third-party tools that you're using to run the organization. And we start looking at that aspect of it all. Once we can identify the gaps, then we move into our digital asset audit. And that's where we really come in and we start gathering all of that information on behalf of the client. There's about 300 plus data points that we've identified that go into a business being digital and online. And it doesn't mean they're selling online. It just means to have any sort of online presence. There's about 300 plus digital points. And so I think a lot of times they'll be able to identify 5: domain, hosting, email address, website, a social profile, right? And so that's where we really dive a lot deeper and get all of that prepared so that we know for sure that they do in fact have ownership as well. When are things going to expire so we don't run into the domain issue that you talked about, and really putting all of that together. And then we give them a comprehensive handoff at the end and say, here's all of the digital assets that you own. Here's everything you need to need. And then now you can go to that deal with a more structured, confident, solution of, yes, here are my assets.
Yeah. And if at that point, when you're trying to identify the 300 things, which I would think off the top of my head, maybe 20, 300's a lot. While you're doing that, I'm assuming people run into issues, right, where they can't find something. Are you able to also assist them with maybe hunting down a password or something? Maybe give me a story of or something that's usually not thought of that maybe people can kind of prepare themselves for.
Yeah, that's a great question. And absolutely, that's what the audit side is about, is we know that there's going to be things they can't find. And so we'll work through the process of all right, who was in charge, what are previous vendors, who's current vendors or employees, could it be a personal account? Is it a business account? And we start working through that recovery because you really can't hand off and sell a business if you're missing some of the critical login details to something or the ownership to something. So yeah, we'll go through that whole process with them. And there's certain ones, Facebook, good luck recovering it. It's not going to happen. But beyond that, for the most part, we can. It just kind of comes down to what is the cost, and not necessarily my cost, but the legal cost. So for example, and not completely related to the transaction side of it all, but we had a client call us the other day in a panic and they were just our web developer passed away. And I was like, okay, great, we'll go ahead and take over and make the edits. Sorry for the loss. What do we need to do? And from there, they were like, oh no, we don't have a domain access. He had used a reseller to purchase that. They don't have hosting access. He was using a reseller for that. They didn't have access to their website. We tried logging in. We tried doing the back doors, everything we could think of. At some point, they removed the email address as well from the back end of the site. So even though there was an email that said, hey, client or hey, company owner, here's your username and password to your website, they didn't work. And so, we had to go through this. But in that situation, we had to start asking for death certificates. We had to start asking for legal to provide us the documents and paperwork that were needed for the actual, domain to recover it. They really didn't want to talk to anybody outside of the gentleman who passed because it was also a resold account. Mm-hmm. And businesses don't always know that. They don't know what's happening in the background. And even for us to go do the research, it was our, years of experience that knew how do we get past what we're seeing to actually dive even deeper into who is in fact hosting this, because we know, it's not what it shows on the who is or whatever. So that's an example, of, but had that happened getting ready to, sell, or if it's a key employee and they're the ones that something happens to them, or they just leave suddenly one day and they're just like, I'm done, I'm over it, I'm leaving. What are they taking with them? So while it's, a bit of an extreme example, it can happen in a lot of situations of who owns this? Is it a vendor? Is it an employer? Is it the actual owner of the business who owns this?
I feel like I understand a lot of things, but not a lot of how that works, right? And I've been in the process of updating my own personal website, and somebody the other day said, well, who's hosting, who's doing that? And I'm like, I'm sorry, no hablo inglés. I'm like, come on, help me out here. So then I had to remember, okay, it was somebody I know that helped me with it. So I reached out to them and they had resold it. And then they're like, no, we can figure it out. And I wanted to set up another email address for the domain. And then I wanted someone to redo kind of the back end of it. And so I'm like, okay, I need to educate myself on how all this stuff works, because I had no clue how any of it works. And then we ended up figuring it all out. But it was interesting because that made me think about like, okay, this is what you go through every day. And then I know we've seen the crazy stories of, there was one website I can remember reading about somebody basically grabbed the domain when it got released, and then they had to like sell it back to them and stuff.
I think Google was one of them that happened to, where they had let it lapse accidentally, and some kid bought it for next to nothing, and it was quite a payout to get that domain back.
Yeah. So how can people, I mean, short of having, the proper login, and I guess you could also look at being nervous if it is a key employee, if they wanted to do something to hurt the company, it'd be pretty easy for them to do that if they have that information. How can they protect themselves to make sure that not only the login, but you've kind of got the proper controls in place?
Yeah, I think, really understanding how is the infrastructure set up. So that's what our digital asset audit stuff is set up to do, is like, to your point, explain who is in charge of hosting and who is the ones that can be making decisions on that. Or yes, the owner has access, but this is the vendor that we've chosen for that. Here's the contract, here's the terms, right? And really kind of having that infrastructure more laid out and identified so that you're not running in circles when that time comes of, let me go backtrack and start going back through all these dots to put this together. And we see it often that they don't realize everything that goes into, oh, like I have a website, but I don't understand what the hosting does. I thought that's what the domain did, and so there's that education piece too of really making sure that the clients understand, hey, these are all of the components that make this happen. And you can't have a website up without the SSL certificate installed anymore, or you're going to get that this site isn't secure image. But they don't realize that that's what's making that error go away, right? So some of it too is just educating yourself on the process of how do these things all connect so that when one goes down, they can know right away who to go talk to. But that's the other piece that we see is that goes down and they don't know who to call. Do they call their IT team? Do they call someone at the, within the company and the marketing team and hope that they're going to know the answer when the marketing team's like, no, we've had someone else handling that part of it. So really knowing who are the key players involved so that something should happen. And then putting into place really good standards of practice. This is the email address we always use. So anytime a new third-party tool is set up, this is the one that's going to go to, so that if there is turnover within the employees or vendors, that email, though, can't go anywhere. Webmaster at marketing@domain.com, info at anything like that you can say, these are the ones we want to always be using, that we know that if there's a renewal that comes up, because we've seen it too, that employees come in and set up all sorts of, here's a license key for a renewal for the website. Here's a third-party tool we want to test out. Here's something else we want to do. Let's sign up for the Canva account. Next thing you know, the credit card has been approved at some point to run all of these. But then in a year, 2 years later, who's going back through and double checking that these aren't just expenses going out the door and that they are in fact still needed? And so that's the other place where we start to come in and save businesses money is, hey, do you know that all this stuff is going out the door and these are things that you should be paying attention to? Or are you getting the renewal reminders to make sure that you either renew it or you turn it off so that you don't keep paying those fees if you don't need it? So, it's just like, but business owners come in and they're busy running a business, we know, right? And it's one more thing to focus on, but really easy to delegate that out to a virtual assistant, interns to set up just to keep them moving, whatever that looks like. So it really does come down to, hey, now that you've grown your business into this sellable deal, how do we now make sure, though, that you do have ownership of everything that got set up to get you to this point so that you can sell that with the valuation that you're expecting as well? Because oftentimes we see the lack of the digital due diligence on a deal side will decrease the valuation at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And my wife bought a e-commerce company about a little over 2 years ago. And we went through the same thing where I'm like, okay, I need to understand, how is the website set up? Like, is it on auto renew? Like, which email address does it go to? Oh, well, we shut down that email address. Now what do we do? So to go back and recreate the email address just to get the email.
To get it.
Yeah. And then we struggled with transferring the Facebook to the point that we basically gave up and had to recreate it and start over. And so I wish I knew you then. It would have been a lot easier. Say, hold on a second, we need to make sure all this stuff transfers. It sounds like not only if you're looking to sell, just in general, people need to reach out to you and say, hey, can you walk me through these 300 points so that I can make sure that, I've got everything set up properly. And of course, if you've got recurring charges going and going, and we probably all need to do that personally as well. Check out, see what we're paying for.
Sure.
Right? So when someone reaches out to you as a buyer, and they're going through the process, what are some of the things that they can do? And then obviously, if I called you today and said, hey, I'm buying a business, this is what they do, what are kind of the first steps? And then how do you sort of take over from there? And then what's the process look like when the deal's done and you're transferring everything?
Yeah. So great questions. With the buy side, I always just say, give us a call and ask, right? Like, where are areas that we could see improvement if we were to acquire this business? Like, what are things that we should be kind of putting on our radar of, is the website gonna, need an overhaul soon? Are there ways that we can streamline the intake process, right? And make sure like, hey, this is much smoother and everything is connected and integrated to our CRM. And so that's another way of like, there's opportunities that we can increase the value after acquiring. So yes, this could be a really good deal. Or, I think it's pretty well sound and I don't think there's too much coming up that you're going to need to worry about. I think it's a great acquisition. So that's one place that I'm always happy to have those conversations and just sometimes even just call and let's have fun and let's see what that looks like before even getting too deep into the deal. The second side then is, as they start working through that process and that kind of the due diligence, if not sooner, is just like, start asking the questions. Do they know where these things are? Do they have marketing and analytic reports to prove the numbers that they are saying that are on there for the revenue and whatnot? Do they actually have that many Facebook followers? Or, what does that all look like? And so starting to piece together the story that they're presenting from the sell side, of like, are numbers there and aligned? And do we actually have access to these things? I've heard though a lot that's what's frustrating in the process is they'll say yes. But they, you don't know until you close the deal and then you start asking the questions. But I think if you start asking ahead of time, it will start to come out. If they start humming and hawing, or if they're just like, yeah, we'll get that to you, and you don't really see answers or anything, they probably don't know where those things are. So that's kind of one of the first ways, even just asking them, how are you set up? Do you have 50 different vendors trying to handle all of these things? Do you have an in-house team of 2 people that are just totally overworked trying to manage all of this? Will also help you start to paint a picture of, what am I inheriting from a digital side? Is this going to be a chaotic transfer? Is this going to be pretty smooth? And am I ready to take that on if I were to acquire this? So that's the next step. And then after that, once the acquisition happens, then we start working through our post-transaction integration. And with that, it's going to be similar, where we just go down the whole, checklist, if you will, again, of all of the data points and say, where is this? Did you get this from them? What do we need to make sure that you do have ownership? Who do you want to have ownership at the company? And work through that whole process so that the team doesn't have to. What we've seen is, even if a PE company or a larger company that's acquiring has a team for marketing, they're usually marketing other businesses that they also own. They don't want to stop for 100 days, 6 months, whatever, to slow down, grab all of these assets, and then pick back up where they left off. They really kind of want to stay in that. And the manual process is quite tedious, or we have more of a proprietary, this is how this works. This is going to go a lot smoother. So that's how we help on the transaction side. And we see it really needing to be implemented way more often, because we get the phone calls 6 months, 8 months, a year later. Why is our website down? And then I have to go, well, you didn't tell me you acquired this.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know it was a site that existed. Now that we do, let's go figure out what's going on. And since it wasn't already in the stack, if you will, we have to go hunt all of this stuff down right then and there and try and get that site back up and running, when we could have just prevented the whole issue in general. But that halts the business. Again, now we're pulling the marketing team off in a more frantic, panic way. It doesn't look good for whoever's job it was either, to have that fall on their plate, that like business completely halted because we couldn't keep marketing going. We couldn't keep the website up, whatever. And in one of the situations, they had sold it off. The guy that purchased was like, don't worry, Paige, we've got this. We've got a team that handles this. We don't need you anymore. And I was like, no worries. Like, happy to provide you whatever you want though. And 6 months later, we got the call from the business owner that was selling and was just freaking out and like, Paige, help me. The website's down. What do we do? And I was like, I don't know. It's not my client anymore. Like I can try what we have. And so we went through about a week and a half, 2 weeks of recovery for it. And it turns out that while he did transfer the website to him, he forgot that the domain was in a different account altogether. And he never brought the domain with him. We couldn't do password resets though, because to your point, the email that was attached had already been deleted. So, and to the domain though, that was expired. So we couldn't do what you did where we'll just go reset up the email address real quick, work through forgot password and go. We had to fight to get that domain back. And that was about a 2-week process. So, and then here at the end, I'm like, who gets the bill?
Yeah.
Is it the one that acquired or is it the one that sold? Because at the end of the day, someone's got to pay.
Both messed up. Well, they both messed up by not using you.
well, that too. But, like, he didn't call me scrambling. She did. So it was just, now it just starts to get even messier than you were expecting. And nobody wants to be put in that spot. So yeah, anytime that we can prevent those types of things from happening, it just makes it a smoother business operation too for companies.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a good opportunity all the way around because not only can you make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be and it gets transferred properly, you're also able to kind of take a look and see where can I save you money and then what can we do from a marketing standpoint. Is your website, brought into, the kind of new age of how everything works? It makes sense for people to reach out to you for multiple things. It's really interesting because, like I said before, we talk about so many things that need to happen within a transaction, after a transaction, but I feel like nobody talks about this. Obviously there's a lot of different ways that people can try to do this, but I think it really makes sense to reach out to somebody that can kind of do all of that for you. We talk about transferring accounting, transferring, employees, all of those things, but no one's talking about this. So I'm glad we're able to talk about it. If there was maybe 1 or 2 things someone could do right away when they're listening to this right now, what would you advise them to do?
Yeah. So one of them is we have a digital asset checklist that you can download on our website. We'll get the link in the show notes for that. But that's going to walk you through about the 7 pillars of how we identify and break everything down. And you just can walk through the checklist and it'll start asking questions of, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you know where this is? What tools are in place? Are you following ADA compliance? All of the various aspects. And then that starts to help identify gaps. Once you can start to identify like, yeah, there's an issue here. I don't have everything that I thought I had. Then is a good time to call and say, hey, like, what's the next step? What do we need to do to start getting this stuff in line? So that would be the first. And then 2, just start document everything, no matter what phase of the business you're in or where you're, what your long-term goals are. The more you can have that plan and the standards of practice and understanding what's going to happen when that key employee leaves. We had a client that employee had everything about how to use the website, all the training docs, all the training materials. And when she put in a resignation, IT team just wiped the computer and handed it to the next employee. And they're like, now we don't know how to use our website at all. It's all there. And I was like, thankfully, again, we had most of it because we were the ones like working with it. But if like we had cut ties at some point and they wiped that computer clean, no, it's a franchise organization with over, 500 locations.
Oh my gosh.
It's not one you're just like, let me go do a quick little Google
Right.
search and figure out how this issue is happening, right? It was, how do we do all of these very technical, custom built, coded pieces of it? And so, yeah, those are examples of how do we have better documentation and know what the protocol is before we just go and start, we don't need those things. We'll just keep moving.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Switch gears just a little bit. How do you think that AI is going to play into a lot of this? And I'm sure you're asked this all the time, but it's, kind of something that I feel like in the last 6 to 12 months has really come into the forefront. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And then also if somebody's using AI or another tech, how can they make sure that that transfers and all of that is really more proprietary to either buyer or seller?
It's a great question. And I think, the biggest one and the thing we're seeing right now is back to ownership. We've got a lot of people that are signing up for GPT accounts and different things and AI accounts that are using their personal because they don't necessarily want the boss to be, knowing that they're running to AI to learn this thing or, using AI to help write emails, whatever that looks like. So they're setting it up on their own, using it privately and quietly. And then over here, they're also training it, right? So it does have tons of company information. What's the protocol for what can and can't go in there of the companies? What's the stuff as far as security and privacy still that's being entered into these places? But two, if you're training it to do all of this, it is on the company's dime and while you're getting paid. So it should be the ownership probably of, but the company doesn't own your personal email account's login, right? And so I think, again, back to what are the standards of practice? How do we say, hey, we're going to provide the account and this is the account that you need to use. And if you leave, that's coming with us. And so starting to set that stuff up now and set it up early is going to be extremely important. And just what are you allowed and not allowed to be using it for? And, having the conversation, I think opening that up to the team discussion is a really good way to start putting that practice into place because it is all still new to a lot of us. And so being able to kind of gauge and say, how do they feel? What's working? How are they currently using it? And welcoming those conversations will then allow you to put that stuff into place. So that's one way that I see it is just the ownership of all of the work and training that's going into it or just the private data that you don't necessarily want in insecure portals is what I would really be focusing on as far as that side of it all. And then you also start to get into when we do a lot of it with the AI integration into websites or using third-party tools, no code even, to make that stuff happen is who's setting these up. We've just got so many more logins than we've ever had. I think this is a service we've been offering for a little while now, but even as we've been pushing it more, it's like, there are so many more third-party tools that people are using than ever before because you do have so many more resources at your fingertips, but it just means maybe 500 data points at some point, right? Because of all of the third parties that people start signing up for. But right now we're in such a discovery phase that we're doing, let's try it. Let's do the free trial. Oops, I forgot to shut it down because I didn't like it, right? So yeah, or it's, $25 to get started on something. And then I want to go up to the max. And then I decide, I'm going to use GPT more than cloud. So let's go that way. Who's canceling these things? Who's paying attention to where the credit card is actually being put? And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot of business expenses go out the door. And so companies can really get a grasp on what is the protocol for when that credit card can be added for some sort of just even trial. Is this tool going to work to meet our needs? Because it isn't as simple as it used to be of here's a CRM, let's go ahead and use that one and keep moving.
Oh yeah. And I'd also would suspect that a lot of the owners are, I don't know how to say it nicely, maybe a little out of touch with what's going on in technology. And then you have employees that are a different generation that are using AI or whatever, third-party tool. So they may not have any idea that it even exists. I feel weird like that half the time. I'm like always trying to learn about AI and how it can help and how it can be used. And it ends up being kind of funny when I'm sitting there going, man, I feel like a boomer. Like I don't know how to get this stuff to work, right? So,
and no, it is true. That's where they're trying things out. Like, let me dabble in this thing as an owner and just kind of see if it's going to be useful for our company. Sometimes you don't want to. Yeah. Let someone who's been doing this for a while and playing around, and that's just what they've been doing in their free time, do it. It's kind of back to when social media was taking off. I started marketing right on the cusp of that. I was also really young when I started. And so I remember having older gentlemen, marketing people, 20, 30 years in business of marketing, but standard marketing, typical, your radio, your TV, your newspapers. And then they saw me come in and they're like, you're coming with us. Like, we need a social presence. We need someone who's understanding what's going on. I think AI is going to be the same thing, right? There's so much that we can do. I've used so many tools over the years, but are we like so up to date on every single AI tool that's out there to make videos, to, make certain things happen. We're really trying to stay at the forefront of it. But yeah, a lot of times it is bringing in a little bit of the younger generation that's just been having fun and going wild with no restrictions, if you will. But it just comes a little more naturally to them because they've been in front of all these other tools now for so much longer than we were.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been great. I always ask 2 questions at the end. So first one, do you have a mentor or have you ever had a mentor?
I have. I had a business coach, I think about 2017 up until this year, that really, really helped me understand. I'm self-taught. So like I said, websites, that even was just me playing around on a computer and learning. So I had the opportunity to learn a lot of how all of the different aspects of the business work. And so that's what I do appreciate about my story and just the way that I built the company. But I also, as I was growing, knew I hit that spot where it's like, what do I do now? Do I go back, or not even back to corporate, but do I go to corporate and get a job doing this? Or do I actually take this to the next level? And that's when I decided, like, Hail Mary, if you will, at that point. Let's get a business coach. Let's, invest in it. And probably one of the best decisions I've ever made for my company, I would say, a lot of people that are trying to navigate that journey, just taking some of the emotion out and letting somebody else who can see it from a different perspective makes a huge difference. Now I feel much calmer going into situations of like, I've seen that. We know how to handle this now. But it took me the better part of 7 years or more to be like, what do I do in this situation? What happens now? So yes, I did have a business coach for a long time, and I definitely recommend them to businesses and owners.
Good. Yeah. There's always, you can always use help on anything in life, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Makes sense. Cool. Okay. Final question. What motivates you?
Motivates me? I just think it's the piece of just like things are changing, and I didn't know I had a drive for business when I got started. I went to architecture school, so I really didn't even know that business was a thing, if you will. But I think now just like it opened up a door one day, and while I was going through this journey of owning a business and just like, wow, there's so much more out there that no one's talking about. And, that people don't realize all the different ways you can operate and own a business, or just the way that a service business is different from a product business that's different than a restaurant, and just really seeing how all the inner workings work. So that's the piece that motivates me the most, is just like, there's so much more to learn, explore, and have fun with. And so I'm always just like perked for, hey, what's going on over there? What's this? And really understanding that. So I would say that's what motivates me the most.
Cool. Yeah. We can always be learning, and there's always different things to keep up with. So
there's no limit, right? I mean, like there is no ceiling. It's how far do you want to go in business? What journey do you want to take in business? People ask, how big of an agency do you want to get to? And I'm like, I don't want to get to 50 to 100 because I want to know who I'm working with. I want to know my team. And so that too has kind of shaped how far do I want to go there. But maybe, I do know I want to be involved in other business ventures. And so really being able to identify that there's just so many different directions you can go. And so I think that's the most exciting part.
Yeah, just staying motivated in general is great. Okay, so obviously people need to reach out to you. There's so many different things that you can help with. I'm assuming most people listening to this are going, oh my gosh, I never thought about that, which is great. So how can people find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn on the personal side at Paige Wiese. We do tons of posting there, just lots of informational tidbits and nuggets to follow along with. And then also visiting our website at treeringdigital.com.
Okay, can you spell that out for us?
TREERINGDIGITAL.com.
Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. And again, thanks for being patient with me. I'm hoping you can help people make it a little easier when they transfer their business, probably save a lot of time and money for people.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We had a great time and happy we could do this.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you all for listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. If you found value in this episode, please follow the show, leave a positive review, and share it with someone. For more information, check out jaredwjohnson.com. We'll see you all next time.